You know, people think marriage is all about love, happiness, and family, but nobody tells you what happens when you marry into a house that slowly becomes your hell. My name's Ria. I'm 35 now, and I'm finally ready to tell you what really happened to me 5 years ago. The night I lost everything. I was married to Arjun, a man I thought was my soulmate. He was charming, sweet, the kind of guy who opens doors and remembers your favorite ice cream. I thought I was lucky, but the day I stepped into his house as his wife, everything changed. His father, Mr. Verma, wasn't just strict. He was cold, controlling, the kind of man whose silence could fill an entire room with fear. He never liked me. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I had opinions. The first few months I kept quiet. I smiled when I was insulted. I obeyed when I was ordered. But then I got pregnant. And suddenly my body wasn't mine anymore. My life wasn't mine. Every morning started with taunts. You better give us a boy this time. Arjun stayed silent, always silent. Then one night I made a mistake. I raised my voice. I told them I didn't care if it was a boy or a girl. I just wanted a healthy baby. And that's when everything went wrong. Mr. Verma stood up, his face red with rage. He shouted something I can't even repeat. And before I could move, he kicked me. Right in my stomach. I remember falling. I remember the pain, the screaming, and then everything went black. Pauses. If you're feeling my pain and you want to know what happened next, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. When I woke up, the first thing I heard was the sound of beeping. Hospital machines. My throat was dry. My stomach felt like fire. And when I looked down, the curve that used to hold my baby was gone. A nurse came over, her face pale, eyes soft with pity. She didn't have to say anything. I already knew. My baby was gone. For a few minutes, I just stared at the ceiling. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. It was like my body forgot how to feel anything. Then I saw Arjun standing near the door. His hands were in his pockets, eyes fixed on the floor. Not once did he come near me. Not once did he hold my hand. When the doctor left, I whispered, Arjun, he killed our baby. He didn't answer. He just muttered, Don't make this a big issue, Ria. Dad didn't mean it. Didn't mean it? How do you not mean to kick your pregnant daughter-in-law? That night, something inside me snapped. I realized I was married to a man who could watch me bleed and still defend his father. When I got home a few days later, the whole house was silent. No one spoke about what happened, not even my mother-in-law. They acted like it was an accident, like I was the problem for talking back. Every corner of that house felt haunted. The walls whispered blame. The pictures on the wall, the ones with fake smiles, mocked me. And my room, it reeked of betrayal. For nights, I'd sit on the floor holding the little blanket I'd bought for my baby. I kept hearing that sound, his father's angry footsteps. Every thud replayed in my mind like a curse. I wanted to run, but I had nowhere to go. My own parents lived far away, and I'd cut off contact when I married Arjun. Now I was alone, completely alone. Soft breath. But I swear to you, that night I made a promise. If they could kill my baby, I'd kill the silence that protected them. After that night, anger and grief didn't sit still inside me. They became a machine. I stopped being the woman who smiled and swallowed insults. I became someone dangerous, quiet, watching and making notes. Every word Mr. Verma said, every look Arjun gave me, I filed away like evidence. First, I learned to act normal again. It was the hardest part. Smiling while my guts were tearing felt like a performance, but it worked. People let their guards down around a broken woman. They think she can be ignored. I used that. I started slipping out after dinner, walking to the bus stop pretending to visit a friend. Instead, I would sit on a bench and plan. I called an old number from my past, a friend I'd fallen out with when I married. I didn't tell her everything at first, just that I needed help. When she heard the tremor in my voice, she came. We met in a dingy cafe at midnight, the kind of place where people don't ask questions. Her name was Asha. She'd known me since college. She knew how to see through my lies. She listened, and when I told her what happened, she didn't pity me. She asked, "What do you want?" That question split me open. What did I want? Justice, freedom, or simply to make them feel the hollow ache that had hollowed me? I started collecting proof. Photos of bruises I hid under long sleeves. Messages Arjun sent me that I'd kept out of spite, dates and times. The name of the taxi driver who had once driven me home after a fight. Small things, little threads. I learned that even a tiny rope, knotted right, can pull a house down. But evidence isn't enough when everyone worships the man who owns the house. So I needed allies. Asha introduced me to a lawyer friend, a woman with a blunt haircut and eyes that didn't blink when the truth was ugly. She taught me to speak without crying. She taught me how to use the system, how to make their silence become their weakness. Meanwhile, at home, I kept up the act. I cooked, I laughed at the stupid jokes. I let Mr. Verma think his authority was safe every night when they slept. I drafted the letter I would one day read aloud in a courtroom. I practiced the words until they didn't make me choke. I won't pretend I wasn't scared. I was terrified. But there was a fierceness in me I hadn't known existed, a hunger to breathe again without their shadow over me. I promised myself, whatever it took, I would not let this go. Not for me alone, but for the tiny life that had been stolen from me. A month passed before anything changed. Arjun thought I had moved on. He didn't notice how quiet I'd become. Or maybe he liked it that way. But silence has a strange power. It lets you hear things others don't want you to hear. Late at night, I'd lie awake, pretending to sleep. That's when I heard them, Arjun and his father, whispering in the next room. They weren't talking about me with guilt. They were laughing, talking about how women these days need to be taught a lesson. My blood froze. They weren't ashamed. They were proud. That was the night my fear finally burned out. All that was left was something cold. The next morning I made breakfast like nothing happened. I wore the red sari Arjun liked, poured his tea, smiled. When he left for work, I took out my phone and messaged Asha. "It's time." She came over 2 hours later with a small black recorder and a file. Inside were papers, legal complaints, medical reports, witness statements. We just needed one thing, his confession. That night, I placed the recorder behind the curtain in the living room. Mr. Verma sat there like a king on his sofa, giving orders as usual. When he started his rant, calling me useless and spoiled, I didn't stop him. I pushed back just a little the way I knew would provoke him. He snapped. He shouted, "You think anyone will believe you? You lost that child because you couldn't keep your mouth shut." My hands trembled. I didn't even care that the tears were real this time, because the recorder had caught everything. The next day, I handed the file to the lawyer. She didn't say much, just nodded once and said, "You're ready." That night, for the first time in years, I slept without nightmares. The house was still the same, but in my head, something had already changed. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the storm they never saw coming. The morning the police arrived, the house smelled of incense. Mr. Verma was sitting in the courtyard, sipping his tea like every other day. Arjun was scrolling through his phone, half awake. And then the siren. Short, sharp, cutting through the calm like a knife. 2 officers stepped in. One of them read the complaint out loud. My name echoed in the hall. Domestic violence, physical assault, loss of pregnancy due to intentional harm. Arjun's head shot up. Mr. Verma went pale, then red, then pale again. He looked at me like I'd slapped him in public. He stood up and yelled, "You think you can destroy this family with lies?" I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The inspector showed him the file, the same one. Asha and I had built piece by piece. Every word, every bruise, every date. And the audio, the moment his own voice condemned him. The silence after that was deafening. Arjun tried to step in, telling them it was all a misunderstanding, but the inspector stopped him cold. "You'll have your chance in court." When they took Mr. Verma away, He didn't resist. He just glared at me, that same icy glare he used to control me with. But this time, it didn't work. For the first time, I met his eyes and I didn't look away. That evening, the neighbors came knocking. Some out of curiosity, others pretending to care. Whispers filled the street. People who once praised the Verma family now looked at them differently. And me? I sat alone in my room, holding the last ultrasound photo I had. I should have felt relief. Maybe victory. But what I felt was emptiness. The kind that seeps into your bones and stays there. Asha called that night. She said, "It's just the beginning, Ria. You did the hardest part. But I knew the road ahead was long. Court cases, public humiliation, maybe even revenge from Arjun's side of the family. Still, I wasn't backing down, because now it wasn't just about me. It was about every woman who ever stayed silent out of fear. And I'd already lost too much to stay quiet again. The first day of court felt like stepping into another world. The air was heavy, part fear, part judgment. People stared at me like I was both brave and cursed. Arjun sat 2 rows ahead with his lawyer, not once looking back. Mr. Verma stood beside him, his face calm, too calm, like he believed the whole system would bend to his power. When the judge entered, everything went silent. My lawyer, Mira, was ready. She had her notes, her file, her calm voice that could slice through lies like glass. When she started speaking, the whole room listened. She played the recording first. That moment, his voice, his words. "You lost that child because you couldn't keep your mouth shut." The room froze. Even the judge leaned forward. I saw Arjun close his eyes like he couldn't believe what he'd heard. Mr. Verma tried to deny it, but his voice on the tape betrayed him. Then Mira called me to the stand. My hands were shaking as I swore the oath. For a second, I wanted to run. But then I remembered that night, that pain, that silence, and something inside me said, no more. I told them everything, every insult, every bruise, every time I begged for mercy and got hate instead. My voice cracked halfway through, but I didn't stop, because I wasn't just talking to the judge. I was talking to every woman who'd ever been told to adjust. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. Even Arjun couldn't look up. He tried to defend himself later, saying he didn't know what his father was capable of. But the judge wasn't buying it. The evidence was clear. The truth was louder than their lies. That evening, as I stepped outside, the media lights hit my face. People asked questions, microphones shoved in my direction. But all I said was, justice isn't about revenge. It's about truth. And for the first time in years, I felt lighter. Not happy, not yet, but free. Free from fear, free from their control, free from silence. Weeks turned into months. Each hearing felt like reopening a wound, but I kept going. Every morning, I'd walk into that courtroom with my head high, even when people whispered, even when their eyes burned holes into my back. Then one morning, Mira told me, "Today's the day, the final verdict." I didn't sleep the night before. I just sat by the window, staring at the city lights, wondering what justice really feels like. Does it heal? Or does it just stop the bleeding for a while? When the judge entered, my heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. He read the judgment slowly, each word cutting through the air. Based on the evidence provided, the court finds Mr. Rajesh Verma guilty under sections 313 and 498A. I closed my eyes. My knees almost gave out. Mr. Verma was sentenced to 10 years in prison. 10 years. For the life he destroyed, for the child I'd never hold. It didn't bring my baby back, but it was something. It was truth, written in ink, signed by the law. Arjun's case came next. He wasn't charged for the assault, but for abetment and emotional abuse. He got 2 years and a fine. When they took him away, he finally looked at me. Not with anger, not even guilt, but emptiness. Like he'd just realized what he'd lost. After the hearing, I stepped outside. It was raining. That soft, cleansing kind of rain that smells like a new beginning. I stood there without an umbrella, letting it wash the dust off my face. People passed by, some whispering, some smiling quietly, but I didn't care anymore. I'd done it. That night, I went home. Not the Verma house, but my own little apartment. The walls were bare, the room quiet. I made myself a cup of tea, sat on the floor, and took out that same ultrasound photo. This time I didn't cry. I just whispered, "We did it, my baby. Your mother kept her promise." Outside, thunder rolled again, but it didn't scare me anymore. Because for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't surviving. I was living. The weeks after the verdict felt strange. The noise that had filled my world for years, the yelling, the fear, the pretending, was suddenly gone. Silence felt too big, too empty. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, still expecting to hear Arjun's footsteps or Mr. Verma's voice booming through the walls, but there was nothing, just peace. It took time for my hands to stop shaking. Even when I walked down the street, I'd catch myself looking over my shoulder. Trauma doesn't disappear when justice arrives. It lingers, like smoke after fire. I started therapy. At first, I couldn't even speak without crying. But my therapist told me something that stuck. "You're not broken. Raya, you just survived too much." Those words became my anchor. I began teaching art at a small school nearby. The first day I walked in, the kids were painting rainbows and paper suns. One little girl asked me, "Ma'am, why do you smile like you're about to cry?" I told her, "Because I finally can." Asha still visited often. We'd sit on the balcony sipping chai, watching the sunset fade behind the buildings. She'd tease me, saying I'd turned into some quiet philosopher. Maybe she was right. Pain changes you, but sometimes it refines you. One afternoon, I packed away all the old court documents and tied them with a red ribbon. Not to forget, but to move on. I kept one thing out though, that ultrasound photo. I framed it and placed it on my bedside table. Now, every morning, I look at it before I leave for work. It doesn't hurt like it used to. It reminds me why I'm still here. The world moved on. People forgot the headlines, the drama, the trial, but I didn't need their sympathy anymore. I had found something stronger than justice. Peace. Not the kind that's quiet and perfect. The kind that comes after you've been through hell and learned to breathe again. It had been almost a year since the verdict. Life had settled into a strange, gentle rhythm. I woke early, watered the small plants on my balcony, went to work, came home, cooked for one. Loneliness was still there, but it no longer scared me. It felt familiar, peaceful even. Then one day, I met Vikram. He wasn't part of my plans. Honestly, I didn't have any plans for people anymore. He was the new English teacher at the school. The kind of man who smiled easily but spoke carefully. He didn't know my story, at least not at first. To him, I was just Riya, the quiet art teacher who always painted near the window. One afternoon, a storm rolled in while we were both still at school. The lights flickered. I laughed softly and said, "Looks like we're stuck here." He smiled and replied, "There are worse places to be stuck." It was the first time I'd laughed with a man in years. A real laugh, not the kind you fake to survive. Over the next few weeks, we talked more. About books, music, childhood memories. Nothing deep, nothing forced. But one day, he asked gently, "You've seen something, haven't you? Something heavy." I froze, my hands went cold. But instead of running, I nodded. And for the first time, I told someone my story without shaking. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer pity. When I finished, he just said, "You must be the strongest person I've ever met." That simple sentence broke something inside me. Not in a bad way, but like sunlight breaking through a closed window. We didn't fall in love right away. It wasn't that kind of story. But he became my friend. Someone who didn't see me as a victim or a headline, just as a woman learning to breathe again. Sometimes, healing doesn't come from revenge or justice. It comes from small, quiet moments. A shared cup of tea, a kind word, A feeling that maybe the world isn't as cruel as it used to be. And that's when I realized my story wasn't about loss anymore. It was about beginning again, on my own terms. One morning, as I was walking to school, I saw a woman sitting on the curb near the market. Her face was bruised, her eyes empty, the same kind of emptiness I used to carry. Something inside me froze. I walked past her at first, but then I stopped, because I knew that silence. It was the silence of someone who had no one to call, no one to believe her. I went back and sat beside her. We didn't talk for a long time. I just handed her a bottle of water and said quietly, "It gets better, I promise." She looked at me, really looked, and tears started falling. That moment stayed with me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her, and all the other women who were still trapped the way I had been. So I made a decision. If my pain had to exist, it had to mean something. The next week I met Asha again. We sat at our usual cafe, the one that smelled like burnt coffee and old secrets. I told her, I want to start something, a place where women can come without fear. She smiled and said, "Then we'll make it happen." We began small, just a rented room behind a bookshop. We called it Udan, a safe space, a home for the unheard. Every weekend women came, some with bruises, some with stories, some just needing to breathe. We didn't judge, we just listened. We helped them find lawyers, therapists, jobs, whatever they needed to start again. At first, I was scared to tell my story in front of them. But when I finally did, something beautiful happened. They didn't look at me with pity. They looked at me with hope. I realized I had spent years thinking my life ended the night I lost my baby. But maybe that was the night something new began. The version of me who could help others survive what I barely did. One evening, as I locked up Udan, I stood in the doorway, watching the lights fade. I whispered to myself, "This is what you were meant to do." And for the first time, I didn't just believe it, I felt it. Udan grew faster than I expected. What started as one small room turned into a movement. Local papers began writing about us. A survivor helping others soar. The first time I saw that headline, I froze. It felt strange seeing my pain turned into words for people to read over their morning tea. TV reporters showed up next. They asked questions that cut deep, some gentle, some careless. Do you forgive your husband? What would you say to your father-in-law if he were standing here? I learned to breathe before answering. I'd say, this isn't about them anymore. It's about the women who still can't speak. That line became my shield. But not everyone liked what I was doing. Anonymous calls started coming at night. Threats, whispers. Men who said I was ruining families, encouraging rebellion. At first I was scared again. I'd double-check my locks, jump at every sound. Then I remembered the night of the verdict. How I stood in front of cameras, trembling but unbroken. If I survived that, I could survive this too. The pressure only made me work harder. We opened another center, then another. Women came from towns I'd never even heard of. Some brought children. Some came barefoot. Every story was different, but the pain, that was the same language. One day, while sorting donation boxes, I found a small envelope with no name. Inside was a note. "Because of you, my daughter is alive. Thank you." Just one line, written in shaky handwriting. I sat there for a long time, holding that note like a prayer. That's when I knew everything I'd lost had turned into something powerful. Not fame, not revenge, but purpose. Still, some nights, the past tried to crawl back. I'd dream of that house, that kick, that scream. But when I woke up, I'd see the photo on my bedside, my baby's picture framed in light. And I'd whisper, "We're helping them now, little one. We're changing the story." The storm that once broke me had started building wings for others. And in those wings, I found my own flight again. A year after Udan became known across the state, life finally felt stable. I had my work, my peace, and the quiet rhythm of healing. The news channels still called sometimes, but I avoided the cameras now. Fame wasn't what I wanted. Peace was. Then, one evening, as I was locking the center, I saw a man standing by the gate. For a second, my heart stopped. The way he stood, hands in pockets, head down, it was too familiar. When he looked up, my breath caught in my throat. It was Arjun. He looked older, thinner, and there were dark circles under his eyes. For a moment, we just stared at each other, frozen in a silence filled with old ghosts. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ria, I just wanted to see you once." Every nerve in my body tensed. I wasn't afraid, not anymore, but my hands still trembled. "I don't think there's anything left to say," I replied. He nodded slowly as if expecting that. "I know," he said, "but I needed to tell you. I'm sorry. Sorry." A word so small it felt meaningless against the weight of everything he'd allowed. I wanted to shout, to ask him where that word was when I was lying in the hospital bleeding. But the anger I expected didn't come, only an odd calmness. "I don't hate you, Arjun," I finally said. His eyes widened. "I just don't know you anymore." He looked down, tears slipping past his guard. "I lost everything, Ria. You were right about my father. I was a coward. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to fix, nothing left to ruin." Before he left, he whispered, "You've changed lives, including mine." Then he walked away. No dramatic ending, no last glance, just footsteps fading into the night. I stood there long after he was gone, staring at the empty road. For years I thought closure came from punishment. But in that moment, I realized sometimes it comes from peace. The past hadn't come to destroy me this time. It had come to bow its head and finally leave me free. Peace never lasts long when people don't like seeing a woman rise. For months after Arjun's visit, Udan was doing better than ever. We'd helped nearly 100 women find safety, jobs, and new homes. But with every success, the whispers grew louder. Some called me brave. Others said I was poisoning families. One morning, I walked into the office and found Mira pacing near the door. Her face was tight. "There's trouble," she said, handing me a newspaper. Right there on the front page, my photo, next to a bold headline, "Is Udan destroying marriages?" The article was full of lies. Twisted stories about women who ran away, families broken apart. They called me manipulative, a woman using her tragedy for attention. For a few seconds, I couldn't even breathe. It felt like the air had turned to ice. Asha stormed in right after, furious. "Someone planted this. Someone wants you shut down," she said. And deep inside, I already knew who it might be. A former politician's wife we'd helped months ago. Her husband had powerful friends. Maybe this was their revenge? The calls started again that night. Men shouting, threatening. Reporters camping outside the center, demanding statements. I kept my face calm, but inside I was shaking. Not for myself, for the women who trusted me. The next day, one of them, a young girl named Kavita, came up to me and said, "Ma'am, they can't touch you. You gave us strength." Her words lit something inside me that fear couldn't reach. We called a press conference. Mira stood beside me while cameras flashed. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't use a script. I just said, "We don't destroy families. We save lives that families refuse to protect." The room went silent. For the first time, I wasn't defending myself. I was defending every woman who'd ever been blamed for her own survival. By the next day, people started seeing the truth. Messages of support poured in. The lies began to crumble. But I knew this was only the beginning. Because when you challenge power, real power, it never forgives you easily. After the press conference, I thought the worst was over. But peace doesn't come cheap when you challenge men who think they own the world. It started small. Broken windows at the center. Hate letters slid under the door. The feeling of being followed. I ignored it at first. Told the women not to worry. But one night, when I reached home, the lights wouldn't turn on. I took a step inside and smelled smoke. Someone had set fire to my living room. It wasn't a big fire, just enough to send a message. On the wall, written in black paint, were 3 words. "Shut it down. For a moment, I just stood there, my body frozen, my mind blank. Then I grabbed a bucket and started throwing water on the flames. By the time the police arrived, half the room was ash, the other half chaos. The officer asked, "Do you know who could have done this?" I looked at him and said quietly, "The same kind of people who kicked a pregnant woman and thought no one would believe her." They promised to investigate, but I didn't wait for results. I called Mira and Asha that night. We met at the office, the three of us, exhausted, angry, but determined. Asha said, "Maybe we should take a break, Ria. It's getting dangerous." I looked at her and shook my head. If we stop now, what message does that send? That fear wins again? For a long time, no one spoke. The only sound was the slow hum of the ceiling fan and the night outside. Then Mira said softly, "All right, we don't stop. But we get smarter." We moved Udan to a safer building the next week. Cameras, security, new locks, all from donations that poured in once people heard about the attack. Women came, volunteers came, support came. Fear tried to knock me down again, but this time I didn't flinch. Because now I knew something I hadn't before. They weren't trying to silence Udan, they were afraid of it. And that fear meant we were winning. A week after the fire, I started noticing something strange. Every time we planned an outreach event or shared our location online, trouble followed. Protests, angry men, fake news. Someone was leaking information. Someone inside Udan. At first, I didn't want to believe it. We were a family. Broken women who'd built something strong from our scars. But one night, Mira caught a volunteer sneaking into the office after hours. She wasn't stealing money. She was taking photos of our files. We confronted her the next morning. Her name was Rachita. Soft voice, nervous smile, joined us just 2 months earlier. When I asked who she worked for, she broke down crying. They told me they'd pay for my brother's surgery if I gave them information. She whispered. "Who told you?" I asked. She looked terrified. "The same people who threatened you, ma'am." "The politicians' men." The room went cold. Mira wanted to call the police immediately, but I stopped her. Rachita wasn't the enemy, fear was. They'd used her desperation the same way they used to use mine. I told her, "You made a mistake, but you're not beyond saving. Help us instead." She nodded, shaking, and agreed to record their next call. 2 nights later, we had proof, a recording of a man saying, "Make sure Udan falls. We'll handle the rest." We sent it to a journalist who trusted us, and within a week the clip went viral. Suddenly, the story flipped again. Now, the media wasn't asking if Udan was destroying families. They were asking why powerful men were trying to destroy Udan. The same night, I sat alone in my office staring out at the city lights. Rachita had left town to stay safe. Mira and Asha were finally sleeping for the first time in days. I should have felt relieved. But instead I felt older. Like every fight carved something out of me, leaving both strength and scars. I whispered to the empty room, "You picked the wrong woman to silence." And for the first time, I truly believed it. A few months after the scandal broke, Udan wasn't just a local name anymore. It had become a movement. We got invited to seminars, colleges, and even TV debates. But the biggest moment came in an email that looked too official to be real. "You are invited to speak at the Global Women's Summit in Delhi." I stared at the screen for a full minute. Me, the same girl who once couldn't speak without trembling? The same woman whose voice was buried under fear and shame? Mira screamed when she read it. Asha started crying, and I just sat there smiling quietly, because deep down I knew this wasn't about me. It was about every woman who ever thought she'd never be heard. The night before the speech, though, something cracked inside me. I was in the hotel room, looking at my reflection, trying to practice. But the words wouldn't come. Every sentence sounded hollow. I could hear my heartbeat louder than my voice. I sat down on the floor, clutching my notes, and suddenly I was back there. The night I lost my baby, the hospital smell, The white ceiling I stared at while wondering why I was still alive. For the first time in years, I cried, really cried. Not out of pain this time, but out of exhaustion. All those years of being strong had caught up to me. I whispered, "Why me? Why did it have to be me?" Then, as if the universe heard, a memory flashed. The first woman Udan ever helped, holding her child, smiling. And I realized maybe that's exactly why it had to be me. The next morning, when I walked onto that stage, the lights were blinding. Hundreds of faces looked up at me. For a moment, the old fear tried to crawl back. But then I took a breath and said, "My name is Ria." And once, I thought my story ended in silence. But silence doesn't end stories. It only hides them. Today, I'm here because I refuse to stay hidden. When I finished, the room stood up. Applause thundered around me. But what I heard most clearly was peace. After the summit, everything changed overnight. My inbox flooded, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, organizations, even foreign NGOs wanted to meet. For the first time, I felt the weight of attention, the kind that could lift you or crush you. A week later, I got a call from a woman named Elena, from a global foundation in London. She said they wanted to fund Udan internationally. "Ria," she told me, "your story isn't just India's story. It's every woman's story." Her words hit deep. All those years of pain suddenly felt like they had a purpose far beyond what I'd imagined. She invited me to London to lead a new branch of Udan. It sounded unreal, a chance to take what we built to the world. But that night, I couldn't sleep, because accepting that offer meant leaving the city, leaving my women, my team, my home. Asha said, "You've earned this, Ria. The world needs you now." But Mira looked at me differently. She said softly, "And what about the women who still come here every morning, asking for you?" That question burned in my chest. Was I ready to move on? Or was I still meant to stay and fight here where it all began? A few days later, I visited the shelter. The first Udan building, the one with cracked walls and faded paint. Kavita, the young girl we'd saved, ran to me and hugged me tight. "Ma'am, will you still be here next month?" she asked. I smiled, but my throat tightened. "I don't know yet, Beta," I whispered. And in that moment, I realized something simple. Maybe healing isn't about where you go, but what you leave behind. Elena's offer was life-changing, but so was the responsibility I carried here. And soon I'd have to choose between the two. The day I landed in London, the cold air bit through my coat. Everything looked perfect. Clean streets, polite smiles, people moving fast with purpose. Elena greeted me at the airport, warm and confident, like someone who believed the world could still be kind. "Welcome to your new beginning," she said. But as I sat in the car watching the city blur by, a strange emptiness filled me. New beginnings always sound beautiful, until you realize how much you left behind. The next morning I stood in a glass building overlooking the Thames. The name Udan International was printed on the wall in bold silver letters. It looked powerful, bigger than anything I'd ever dreamed. Elena handed me the contract. "All we need is your signature," she smiled. My hand hovered over the paper, and then I saw something. A small framed photo on her desk. A woman and a little girl smiling. The girl looked almost the same age my daughter would have been. Something inside me broke quietly. I looked out the window, pretending to admire the view, but my vision blurred. I thought I buried that ache years ago. But grief doesn't die. It just waits for silence. That night, I walked alone through the city. Rain fell softly, and neon lights reflected off the wet streets. For the first time in years, I felt lost again. I'd come here to expand Udan, but instead, I felt a million miles from the woman who started it. A message buzzed on my phone. It was Mira. Just 2 words, "We miss you." I sat on a park bench staring at the glowing screen and whispered, "I miss me too." By morning, I knew what I had to do. The contract was still unsigned, because maybe some wings aren't meant to fly away. Maybe they're meant to stay and shelter others. I booked my flight home, back to where it all began. When the plane touched down in India, something inside me exhaled. The air was thick, noisy, alive, chaotic in the way that felt like home. But as soon as I reached Udan, I knew things had changed. The once busy corridors were quiet. Half the lights were off. Asha met me at the door, her eyes tired. "Ria, we didn't want to worry you," she began, "but things have been bad." While I was gone, funding had dropped. Donors had backed out after more rumors spread online. Fake reports, twisted videos accusing Udan of corruption. Someone wanted us gone again. Mira tried to fight it, but the stress had made her sick. She was resting at home now. I stood in that empty hall, staring at the faded posters that once shouted hope. Every wall here carried our story, our scars, and I wasn't going to let anyone erase them. That night, I called an emergency meeting. Only a few staff members showed up, some scared, some unsure if it was worth continuing. I told them the truth. I went to London to see what the world could offer. But everything I want is here, and we're not done yet. One of the volunteers whispered, "But they're powerful. Ria, what if they come after us again?" I smiled softly. Let them. We've fought worse. The next morning, I went live online. No press, no media, just me and my phone. I told everyone exactly what had happened, every lie, every threat. And then I said the words that reignited everything. You can silence one woman, but not all of us. The video exploded overnight. Messages poured in, lawyers, activists, even students offering help. For the first time in months, Udan felt alive again. When I visited Mira the next day, she looked weak but smiled. "You came back," she whispered. I squeezed her hand. I never really left. But deep down, I knew this was only the calm before another storm. Because when you rise after being broken, the world always tries one more time to push you down. And I could already feel that push coming. The next few weeks were chaos. We were rebuilding Udan piece by piece, cleaning the office, restarting workshops and meeting donors. Everything seemed fine on the surface, but something didn't sit right. Money was still disappearing from our accounts. Emails to sponsors were being intercepted. It felt like someone was pulling strings from inside. One evening, I stayed late to check the financial logs myself. The office was dark, quiet, only the faint hum of the ceiling fan. As I opened a folder on the computer, I froze. There it was, an outgoing transfer to an unknown account. The name on the authorization file made my stomach twist. Asha. My heart pounded as I reread it, hoping I was wrong. Asha, my friend from the beginning. The woman who held my hand through the worst nights. I wanted to deny it, but the proof was right there. Her password, her ID, her signature. The next morning, I confronted her quietly. She didn't look surprised. Instead, she sighed, eyes heavy. "I was going to tell you," she whispered. "Tell me what, Asha? That you were selling us out?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "It's not what you think." They threatened my son, said if I didn't help them shut Udan down, they'd hurt him. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. All my anger melted into something worse, heartbreak, because I knew that kind of fear too well. Still, the betrayal cut deep. I said quietly, "You should have told me. We would have protected you." She shook her head. "You can protect women, Ria, but no one can protect their children." I couldn't even argue. I just walked out, numb, feeling the weight of it all pressing down. Later that night, she disappeared, left the city, left no note, just gone. I didn't report her. I couldn't, because in some twisted way, she was just another victim of the same cruelty we'd been fighting all along. That night, standing in the empty office, I whispered to the darkness, "They think this will break me. But they don't know. I've already been broken once, and I survived." The fallout from Asha's betrayal hit fast and hard. Within a week, government officers showed up at Udan with notices. They said our accounts were under investigation for financial irregularities. They sealed half the office, took files, computers, everything we'd built. I stood there helpless as they carried away boxes of documents, pretending it was just procedure. But I knew better. This wasn't about money. It was about silencing us again. Mira called me that night, voice trembling. "Ria, they're saying Udan might be blacklisted." I wanted to reassure her, but my throat felt tight. I'd been through pain before, but this was a different kind of cruelty. The media went wild again, the same cycle of doubt, gossip, and judgment. Some people who once praised us started pulling away. Sponsors went quiet. Even a few women from the shelter left, afraid of the chaos. I spent nights alone in the half-empty office, staring at the flickering light bulb above my desk. I kept thinking about Asha, wondering where she was, if her son was safe, if she regretted it. But mostly, I wondered if Udan would survive. Then one morning, Mira arrived with something in her hand, a brown envelope. "No return address," she said. Inside was a small USB drive. When we plugged it in, a video played. Asha. She looked tired, eyes red, but her voice was steady. "They made me do it, Ria. I'm sorry. I've recorded everything. Every call, every threat, every name. Use it. Finish what we started." For a second, I just sat there frozen. The drive contained proof, everything we needed to expose the people behind this. It was Asha's way of making it right. Tears filled my eyes as I whispered, "You came back in your own way, my friend." That night, I sent the files to every journalist who'd ever supported us. No fear, no hesitation. If they wanted a war, they were about to get one. And this time, I wasn't fighting alone. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. Every news channel, every online platform, all playing the same clips from Asha's recordings. Powerful names, political figures, businessmen, men who'd smiled on camera while funding campaigns for women's rights. Now the world saw them for who they really were. I watched the chaos unfold on TV, reporters shouting, people demanding arrests, hashtags flooding the internet. For the first time, I didn't feel small. The truth was finally louder than their lies. Mira burst into the office, breathless and smiling. "Ria, you did it! They can't touch Udan now. Everyone's talking about you." But I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Because behind every headline, there was still a trail of women who hadn't survived to see this moment. And one of them was my child. Still, something shifted that day. The police reopened the case against the people behind the attacks. Officers who once ignored us now stood guard outside our building. Justice wasn't just an idea anymore. It was happening. That evening, I stood on the balcony of Udan, watching the sunset paint the city gold. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. A familiar voice came through. "Ria," it said, "this isn't over." My heart froze. I knew that voice. The same man who had threatened Asha, the one behind everything. He continued, "You think truth makes you safe? You've made enemies, powerful ones." I didn't speak. I just listened. When he finished, I said softly, "You made one mistake. You taught me how to fight without fear," and I hung up. For a long time, I stood there in silence. The night wind was cold, but it didn't scare me anymore. Because this time, I wasn't the woman who needed saving. I was the woman who saved others, and if they were coming for me, they'd have to face an army of women who now had voices. 2 nights later, I got a message that chilled me to the bone. It came from Asha's old number, but the tone wasn't hers. "Meet me where it all began, midnight, come alone." I knew it was a setup. Still, I couldn't ignore it. Something deep inside told me this was the moment, the final chapter of this long, brutal fight. I didn't tell Mira, didn't call the police. I just drove to the old Udan building, the one we'd abandoned years ago. The road was silent, the sky a heavy shade of black. When I walked in, dust swirled through the air. The walls still carried our faded posters, "Let her fly." And in the middle of the room stood a man I recognized immediately. The politician's right-hand man. The one from the recordings. He smiled. Calm, confident. Ria, he said, you've caused us a lot of trouble. I stood my ground. You killed my peace years ago. Trouble's the least I could return. He laughed. Do you think the world will protect you forever? You're one woman against power you can't imagine. I took a step closer. No, I'm one woman who doesn't bow anymore. His expression changed, annoyance flickering in his eyes. He pulled out his phone, showing me a video. It was Mira, taken outside her house that morning. My chest tightened. What do you want? I asked quietly. Simple, he said. Walk away. Close Udan. Leave this country if you have to. Do that, and your friend stays safe. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed to protect Mira. She'd been my sister through all of this. But then, I thought of every woman who'd ever come to us, begging for safety, for justice. If I walked away now, their battles would die too. So I stared straight into his eyes and said, You can threaten me. You can burn my world again. But you'll never kill what we've built. Right then, headlights flashed through the windows, police cars. Mira had followed me, recording everything. The man tried to run, but it was over. For once, justice didn't come late. And as he was taken away, I finally felt the weight lift. The kind of freedom that doesn't need permission. The night they arrested him, it felt like the city itself exhaled. The air was lighter, quieter. When I walked out of the police station, Mira was waiting. She ran straight to me, her eyes wet. You really thought you could keep me out of this? She said, half angry, half laughing. I hugged her tight. For years, we'd fought side by side, bled, cried, and built something no one thought would last. And now, for the first time, it felt like we'd truly won. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Headlines changed from scandal to victory. The men behind the threats were exposed, charged, and publicly disgraced. People called it Ria's revolution. But inside, I wasn't celebrating. Because winning never felt like I imagined it would. It wasn't joy that filled me. It was peace, heavy and quiet. One morning, I visited the old Udan Center for the last time. The building was half broken, walls cracked, but it still smelled like hope. I walked through the empty rooms, touching the peeling paint, the forgotten chairs, the echoes of laughter and tears. On one wall, a faded drawing caught my eye. A little girl with wings. Underneath, written in chalk, "We can still fly." I don't know who drew it, but I smiled through my tears. Maybe one of the women who once found her strength here. I placed a single white flower by that wall and whispered, "For my baby." For every woman who never gave up. As I stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds, lighting up the dust in golden flecks. Mira was waiting near the gate, smiling. "So what now?" she asked. I looked at her, then at the horizon beyond the city. "Now," I said softly, "we live. We really live." We stood there for a while, not saying anything, just breathing, just existing. And for the first time since that terrible day years ago, my heart didn't ache. It felt whole, because pain had been my beginning, but peace was my ending. It's been 10 years now. 10 years since that night that changed everything. The kick, the scream, the silence that followed. Sometimes it feels like another life, like it happened to someone else. But then I catch my reflection and see the faint lines near my eyes, the calm in my smile, and I remember I'm still her, the woman who lost everything, and then built it all again. Udan isn't just a shelter anymore. It's a movement, hundreds of centers across India, run by women who were once survivors, just like me. When I visit them, I see pieces of my old self in every face. Fear, strength, rebirth. There's one girl, Pooja, barely 19, who runs a center in a small village. She once told me, "Ma'am, when I first heard your story, I thought you were some hero, but then I met you and realized you were just human. That made me believe I could be strong too." Her words stayed with me, because that's all I ever wanted, for women to know they don't need to be fearless to fight. Mira still works with me. She laughs more now, Though her hair has turned silver at the edges, every year on the same date, we visit the old Udan building, now turned into a memorial. On one wall carved into stone are these words: "For every woman who was told to stay silent, your voice is your freedom." I trace those words with my fingers every time and whisper, "We did it." Some nights I still dream of my baby. In the dream, she's running across an open field, laughing, the wind in her hair. I never see her face, but I always wake up smiling, because I know she finally got her wings, and maybe so did I. The world calls me Ria Mera, founder of Udan, but in my heart, I'm still just Ria, a woman who learned that even from the ashes of pain, something beautiful can rise. And if my story means anything, let it mean this: no matter how hard they try to break you, you can still fly,